I see people starting to join us. I'm actually going to wait about a minute or two just to
Okay.
make sure we give people an opportunity to log in.
Good idea. Sounds great. A lot of artists here, so we're generally going to be a little late. Hopefully busy painting.
Yeah. Well, I see the number is kind of ticking up. As I mentioned, I'm going to give it another moment before we get started, just for folks who are coming in, if you're curious. Okay. So, my name is Dexter Wimberly. I'm a senior critic at New York Academy of Art. I am very, very honored to moderate these discussions with fantastic artists and other arts professionals. It's always great to have a conversation about what an artist has going on in their life, and also to bring this information not only to New York Academy of Art students, but to the world through the magic of Zoom. I'm going to start off by introducing today's guest by reading her bio, and then we'll get into a conversation. As I mentioned earlier on, we still have people filing in, so hopefully folks that are joining can kind of catch up and meet us where we are. Aleah Chapin is a painter who whose direct portrayals of the human form have expanded the conversation around Western culture's representations of the body in art. Her work has explored aging, gender, and beauty, influenced in part by the community within which she was raised on an island in the Pacific Northwest. In 2020, Chapin's work took a radical shift inward, expanding her visual language in order to better express the turbulent times we are living in. Consistent throughout her career, Chapin's work asked the question, what does it mean to exist within a body today? Chapin holds an MFA from the New York Academy of Art and a BFA from Cornish College of the Arts. She has attended residencies at the Leipzig International Art Program in Germany and MacDowell in the United States, and has exhibited both nationally and internationally at Flowers Gallery, the Belvedere Museum in Vienna, and the National Portrait Gallery in London, among others. Chapin was a recipient of the Promising Young Painters Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters in New York, the Elizabeth Greenshields Foundation grant in Canada, a postgraduate fellowship from the New York Academy of Art, and won the BP Portrait Award at the National Portrait Gallery in London. Her work has been published extensively, including New American Paintings, Art Maze Magazine, 50 Contemporary Women Artists, and Radio Juxtapose. Chapin is also the subject of a BBC documentary titled Portrait of an Artist. So today we are honored to be joined by Aleah Chapin. So I've read a version of your bio, but I'd love to give you a moment to introduce yourself a bit and tell us maybe some things I've left out.
Well, thank you so much, Dexter, for moderating this conversation, having a conversation with me, and thank you for everyone who is here. So my name is Aleah Chapin, and yeah, Dexter read my bio, all of the, the resume stuff, all the fancy stuff. It's pretty wild to hear it. Kind of doesn't feel like it's me, but I think that's probably a good thing. So yeah, I mean, I grew up on Whidbey Island, in a really wonderful community, and moved to New York for New York Academy of Art. And now I just moved to LA, and so now I'm here and really excited to talk to you. Yeah, I think we'll probably get into a bunch of other things, but that's my quick introduction. Also, this is, New York Academy of Art kind of setting this up, and that is, of course, my school, and I love that place, and I'm just really happy to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So whenever I go into these kinds of conversations with artists, I always ask myself, for the people who are attending, like, how much do they know and how much don't they know? So I don't want to assume that everyone knows a ton. Maybe a lot of people are coming here out of sheer curiosity. So I'm going to start with a really basic question, maybe not a simple question, but it's a basic question. And that is, what inspired you to focus on the human form in your art?
It's a very good question. It's a big question because it is, the content of work, which is important. For me, it's always been something that I've been drawn to. And I know that for a long time in school, I was really like, and up until really grad school, I was really looking for what my message was going to be. What could I say? And I kept kind of coming up with things that didn't really feel true. They felt very kind of in my head. And somehow coming back to the body, just that was always part of the work. And so kind of during a crisis, just going through a crisis, I came to this point where I was like, just felt the body, that's what I need to paint. And I'm going to start there. And that's where the Aunties project started. This was in graduate school at the New York Academy of Art for my thesis project. And the body itself, for me personally, I think something that I'm very interested in are more, I mean, we all have a body, but I was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease when I was around 13 or 14. And I think, I don't know, but I think that that probably had a big impact on just how I perceive the body, because I had to become very aware of what it's like to be in a body that is in pain and not working how it maybe should work at that age. And so I've just been very pulled into my body at a very young age, and also learned that I'm way more than my body as well, because my body was there in pain, and yet I was able to be creative and live this whole life outside of that as well. So I think that's probably why for me it's been an interest. And of course, you know, historically, the figure is something that is very much in art, and I'm, you know, always loved seeing figurative art in the past. So probably those.
Thank you. So the other question I have is, like, how has growing up on an island in the Pacific Northwest influenced your perceptions of things like aging, gender, and beauty?
Yeah, so it's not specifically the island or an island. I mean, of course, I think an island does create a community because you do have borders where you do need to look inwards. So there was a very tight knit community, and the aunties, my mom and her friends, and this is just who they were. They are still, and I think some of them are probably here. Um, Very I guess progressive in their views of beauty and aging, and that's for me was normal. It was just completely normal. And so getting out into the world, and also just seeing in art, seeing how little that was actually how, I guess, how different my perception of aging and beauty was than the rest of the world. And it was just something I wanted to see more, I guess. And so I wanted to see it in art. So I decided to make it my own work.
There was a radical shift in your work that's mentioned in your bio. Can you describe like the moment or experience that led to that radical shift in your work in 2020?
Yeah, probably many little moments. I have spent my entire life pretty much just obsessed with painting realistically and really searching for the real. And I took that really far, and it felt so good to do that. But at a certain point, I felt like there was something else that needed to be said, that I wanted to say, that couldn't be said through just pure realism anymore. And it was before the pandemic started. But not too much before. I started to just do these like automatic drawings, I call them, but they're paint on paper, because that's really my medium. Very quick, using my non-dominant hand, really just to get kind of emotions out, and work not from the outside, like not look at a photograph or a model, and just see what would come out. And a bunch of work came out, and I just sort of sat with those for a little while. And then the pandemic hit, and that allowed me to have the space and time to dive into something very different. And it really, I mean, I think it did this for all of us. It made us go internal, because the whole world outside sort of shut down. And for me, it was just the right time in my own personal, where I was creatively, where I really felt like I wanted to go inward and see what was in there. And so then the work came out in this way that, you know, does have realism. Absolutely. I still love that. And then it also has all these other kind of visual languages that come from a very imaginative place. I think of it as my previous work, which I'm very proud of and will always love, as coming from the outside. I was looking at people I love. I was looking at the outside world, trying to get at something inside. And I, you know, I hope I did that. I think I did that. And this new work is coming from the inside. The images come from me, um, and then I bring them out into the world. I mean, it's yeah, just going from the outside to the inside and bring it out again. I'd say that's sort of the shift in words, if that makes sense.
No, it makes absolute sense. It makes me think of something else, and like, how do you think your work contributes to or challenges like Western culture's representations of the body in art?
I mean, it's really the previous work before the shift in my work in 2020. I think that did that the most. Just purely painting real women of a certain age, naked, not sexualized, not posed. We haven't seen that very much, or if we have, it's been maybe a negative, you know, or yeah, it's just we just haven't seen it in that way very much. And so I felt like this work, being real women, older women, just being themselves in their bodies, that just being out in the world kind of challenges what has previously been seen in the art world.
So thank you. I have a series of images. I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna continue asking you some questions, but I'm also gonna rely on you to let me know if you can actually see my screen when I share it. Please
I
let me
can
know
see
if you
it.
can. Can you
Yes,
see it?
absolutely. Yep.
Okay, great. Because sometimes when you do this, it's really difficult. You still see my screen.
Absolutely. Yep. Looks great.
Okay, great. So we're going to start off looking at some images from 2018, 2019, and then I'll continue asking you some questions. So
Cool.
can you walk us through your creative process when you start a new piece?
Yeah. So I'll talk about this previous work first, since that's what we're looking at. So yeah, the process for an image like this and for all of the auntie's work, is that I'm taking photographs. So I'll set up a photo shoot with my models, with my wonderful aunties, and outside, not in this location and not at night. It was actually during the day, probably late afternoon, and outside on Whidbey Island. And I will just take hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photos. And really, I'm not posing them, because it's really important to me to not impose my agenda on them, but really to create a space for them to be themselves, and to move, and to see what will come out of themselves when they are really inhabiting their body. So I start by actually really having people close their eyes and take a deep breath and kind of go inside and be in your body, and then the images will come from that. So for this though, I will sometimes give a little bit of a guidance. And this, I think I remember I said, be one body. So I just really wanted them to be a single body and see what would happen from there. And then after that, I'll look through all my photographs and find the ones that really stand out, as they just sort of grab me, and they kind of hit me and call me into the studio. They're just like, I have to paint this. And then for something like this, the background is kind of invented, and also from some photos I took in Scotland at one point. And I will totally shifted the colors to make it more like nighttime. And then I do an underpainting with brown pink by Sennelier, and it's like this really green yellow color actually. And then I'll just dive right in with color, and I'll do layers and layers and layers of that. And so same with this one. So this one I've invented the background a little bit, a little pieced together different bits of background, and really wanted the light to make sense. And I want these paintings to feel like I want the figures in the paintings to feel like they're in a world that could exist. It is plausible, but it also is a little otherworldly. They're not they're not really in spaces that necessarily exist. I mean, they don't actually exist. I'm generally making them up or piecing them together. But I like that just subtle like energy of this is sort of like a world that's a little parallel to ours. Yeah,
Um,
so I just dive in until it feels alive, basically.
so tell me, what kind of conversations do you have with your subjects before you invite them on these kinds of shoots and invite them to be in your paintings? What are those conversations like?
Well, for these ones, the initial conversation was, hey, aunties, will you be part of my thesis project? Will you pose naked for me for my thesis project for grad school? Little did we all know what that would all turn into, and I'm very grateful to them. But the conversations are, I mean, it's pretty simple. Just will you pose for me? And because these are women I've known most of my life, some they were in the room when I was born, my mom and other people, and it's pretty natural. I just am trying to make them feel comfortable, and absolutely, if they don't want to do it, I'm not forcing anyone to do this at all. And they also all really know each other, and so I'm just capturing them.
I understand. There's also in this particular period of time, you were doing some landscapes or paintings of objects. And can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you chose these two actually, because they're really special paintings to me that were a bit unique, and I hadn't done this much. So like many figurative painters, I imagine I was definitely one of them. I was really just interested in the figure, not interested in the background for a very long time. And then something started to shift, and I became more and more interested in the environment. And so much so that I did this painting, and the next one you're going to show from just completely no figures whatsoever. And this, what I found actually with painting these, they're really large. They felt like I was still painting a body. It's just the body is rocks. It's made up of different textures and different colors, but I'm creating a form that has a life that has lived beyond me in the past, and it will live on in the future, and it is alive in this way, and it has all of these quirks and these this personality, and so that these really came alive to me in this. And it's interesting, these images looking back, these two paintings, I did them right at the in my work, like right before the work, and it's meet, and this was oh, what was this called? Oh, what happens at the is right before the pandemic hit, right before work changed. And that's really something I love about art, is how it can actually sort of foreshadow what's going to come and have no idea. So for me, this was kind of like my portal through to what was going to come next. And I really, these paintings are special to me. And they were very challenging to paint, but a lot of fun. And when I was up close with them, a lot of the brush marks would just really become abstract, and just all of these designs and patterns, and how my own body would move because they're really big. How my hand wanted to move at that particular moment, that would start to become part of the painting itself. And yes, it is referenced from photographs, but there's a lot of inventing going on in the kind of in the texture in there. And I just, that kind of going into my imagination a little bit more. Now I'm thinking about it, like that was also sort of preparing me for what was going to come next, I think.
And so I have a question regarding staying inspired. I mean, obviously, being a figurative painter is very time consuming. The laborious nature of the work is really intense. So how do you stay inspired to continue making this kind of work?
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain kind of work ethic that I think you just need to build like a muscle. You just go to work, and so there's that, and there's knowing that I believe in this, in the bigger picture, in the longer run, and I know it might take me months to finish. And so I'm going to go to work, and I'm going to hold that vision of where the painting is going to go, and where this body of work is going to go, and where all of my work is going to go hold these different scales of, I guess, thought in my mind at the same time. And thinking about knowing that it's going to be somewhere like that, that can help me be inspired, just holding on to that thought of where it's going to be when it is finished. And then I also just love paint itself. I mean, paint is just magical, what it can do, and it's always surprising and it's always challenging. And every painting goes through an awkward teenage stage, and every painting I feel like I've forgotten how to paint. And so that's, and then I remember again, and so keeps it exciting.
So we're going to look at some works from this sort of transitional period that you mentioned earlier to kind of talk about how you kind of made the leap from the types of work that we were just looking at to this work, and how did you find the courage to do that?
Well, I thought no one at first, so that's a good way to find courage, is to just do it. Like I told myself, no one needs to see this. And then it was the pandemic, and so everything was canceled and no one needed to see anything for a while. So there was that, and I think telling myself that is helpful for me to really take a risk. And I was also just at a point where I needed to. I mean, you can see the energy in this painting. These paintings are very personal, and this painting is called The Purging, and I just had just so much stuff to get out, and so much kind of control that I had been, figurative realism really takes a certain amount of control. And I think that there was part of me that just really needed to let go of that and just let stuff come out. And so that really kind of, I just allowed that to come into the paintings. Like these paintings are really just mirrors of what I was going through, not in a literal way necessarily, because I wasn't thinking about it too much, but more of a body sense of like, this is just what it feels like right now. Because it came from really quick paintings, and then they turned into much more longer, more involved paintings where I did take reference photos of my own self and, compose them a little bit more, and or quite a lot more. And there's a lot of vulnerability. I feel like this painting is, very vulnerable. It's also, I'm trying to protect myself, but how much am I actually protecting myself here? And yeah, these paintings were fun to do as well. I must say, like I've had more fun painting in these recent years than I've had before, because I'm challenged in new ways. I'm having to make creative decisions that are based off of things that aren't just, does this look real and is the paint beautiful, but does this mark feel right? Can I just leave this big brush mark here? And is it right? Or do I need to actually push it a little bit more? Does it need a little more awkwardness and a little more struggle? Or and so it's just opened me up into a whole new world of challenge that has been invigorating, really invigorating to do.
So I have a question that's a little off track, but still I think can keep us moving forward. Can you share a particularly memorable response or reaction or interaction you had with someone who saw your work?
Trying to think of a specific one. I'm not sure if I have a specific one on the spot. Maybe if I thought about it a little bit more, but I know when people have cried, I don't want to make people cry, of course, but when someone has cried, I know that I have somehow touched them in some way that, I mean, I feel like it could take a lot for someone to be moved by art. And so when that has happened, that is just means so much to me. Again, I don't want to make people cry, but I want to make, I want my work to mean something to people. And so I think that, I know it's not a specific thing, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's still helpful. I mean, I often feel that in some ways, great art should make you cry. Whether it's tears of sorrow or tears of joy, I guess that's up to the individual. But
Yeah.
art has made me cry. Sometimes tears of joy and sometimes tears of sadness. But I think that's a good thing, especially these days.
Yeah.
But also makes me think about the relationship between the artist and their own work. There was a time where I spent a lot of time thinking about whether or not the greatest beneficiary of the art is the person that's creating it in some ways, because there are obviously some things that you need to say and express, and heaven forbid those things remained inside of you. But how do you maintain your own sort of mental and emotional well-being while you're engaging with this intense subject matter?
I think exactly by engaging with it. Because otherwise it stays stuck inside. And so I found that this new work in particular, because it is so personal and comes from inside, um, it has helped me emotionally so much because I'm actually able to see what it is that might be inside of me that beforehand I just sort of feel something, and then by getting it out visually, it's kind of like writing, journaling, I guess, in a way. It's just seeing it, reading it, getting it out into physical form has helped me process it. And then when it's out, I'm sort of it's released from me, and then it also teaches me so much. Um, and will often, like the rock paintings kind of foreshadow something that I didn't know was going to happen. And so I feel like I learned from the paintings so much, and just really I try to stay open to not knowing what they're about. That's a huge part of it for me, is really not going into a painting knowing this is about this and it's going to say this message, because for me that's not what painting's about. For me, painting is about asking more questions than answering them, um and getting out what is inside and getting seen what is invisible.
Thank you for that. I also love the fact that you have these sort of chapters in your creative life as far as the paintings go. And I find it inspiring. I've talked to many artists who are often concerned or worried that if they make a radical shift in their work, if they move away from something they've become known for,
Mhm.
then they may be undermining their career or success.
Mm.
And I've always been of the mind that if you have a long enough career, you should be able to express yourself in different ways,
Yeah.
not remain trapped in one particular way of painting or drawing or sculpting or any medium that you're working in. Um, have you ever experienced any pushback on these shifts?
Um, well, it's really mainly just been this one big shift, and um, I don't know if I've experienced pushback, because the people who are going to write to me or respond to me about them, they like the work. Um, but I know I was scared to put it out there, and I know that I was scared to make the change, but I also knew that I was more scared not to make the change. I was more scared to stay exactly the same. Um, and I think I can be kind of stubborn like that, and I just need to paint what I need to paint. And if I don't want to paint something, I really struggle painting it, and it's not going to be the best painting. Um, and I think that it's maybe good for me to have that. Um, but it's scary for sure. It is definitely scary, but I try to hold the long vision, the long arc of my career as an artist in my mind, instead of just thinking about next week or next month or next year, and just thinking the most important thing is that I am happy with what is going on in the studio. And maybe happy is a sort of superficial word, but that I feel connected to what is going on in the studio, so it doesn't become a product. And there's going to be ups and downs in the market. There's going to be ups and downs in all of that. And I can only control so much of that. So I might as well just paint really what is true to me and follow that long arc. And I don't know where it's going to go, but I just have learned to trust it. And even when I doubt it, I just trust it again and trust it again.
Can you I think that painting probably answers a lot of questions for you. But can you tell me something that you're still curious about exploring through your work that you've yet to explore?
Hmm. Um, I mean, paint itself is one thing. The just so many ways, I can't even think of the word, but there's so many different things you can do with paint itself. And so I'm very interested in just developing my relationship with paint further and how that can, I think, connect with and explore more psychological things. And I'm very much still interested in the body, but I'm interested in how how that can be broken apart a little bit more, to explore something that is even less kind of like a formed body. um I'm very interested in sculpture, whether that is doing a sculpture or painting as if I'm sculpting, which is something I definitely think about, is painting as a sculpture. And what I mean by that is three-dimensional form and kind of a tactile quality. Um, and I'm, interested in just continuing to tap into that river that I think where all creativity comes from, that is, I think, a kind of collective consciousness. And it's very much personal in me, but I also know that I'm connected to everyone else. We're all going through so many things in this world. And so that's probably the thing I'm most curious about, is just how can I tap into that better and deeper, and what will that show me? Because I can't say where that's going to go, because I don't feel like it's entirely me. That's me just trying to be present with the times, and what I'm experiencing as a human being in this world, sharing it with so many other human beings. And so I'm really just interested in being in the present moment as the present moment moves into the future. I know I'm getting kind of out there here, but these are things that I do really think about with painting. So yeah, following that deeper.
Thank you for sharing that. So now we're coming sort of to the present here. Let's call it another chapter. So again, a shift from the type of work we just looked at. And can you talk about like how that shift happened? What were you thinking about and as you were making that transition?
Yeah. So the previous work, which is the first shift in my work, those were very, very much, I was keeping the realist part and the abstract part, just for simple language here, very separate. And I was keeping sky and landscape very separate. They were, they were all together, but they were kind of in their own, they were very controlled, much more controlled. And so what I wanted to do was break that apart more and allow the spaces between the realism and the abstraction and the invention to all sort of merge a little bit more, and not control that so much, and not preconceive it very much. And so really allowing these things to merge and come together and flow together more. And this work that you're showing now is part of a show I just had in New York at Flowers Projects. And it was called The Space Between Us. And really it's what I'm interested in with this work, is the spaces between human beings, the spaces between people, our relationships, our connections, also just the connection with your own self. And sure, we'll get more. There's some paintings that are a little more like that, but yeah, I wanted to explore what is that space between us, and how, yeah, that one's definitely very much of a connection with my own self, and just really explore what that looks like, perhaps, and what that feels like. And with this work, when it hits my nervous system in a way that kind of vibrates at this, it's hard to put into words, but when it hits my nervous system in the right way, then I know that it's an image that is needs to be out in the world, and it's a painting that is finished, and it is I'm just getting more and more in touch with, I guess, my nervous system, and how a painting, its color, its line, its movement, value, it's all of those things, and how do they kind of hit my nervous system and hit my unconscious in that way, that feels really good. So all of these paintings, I was checking in with my nervous system all the time throughout them, and really exploring that, and exploring that space between us. And I also noticed in these, I've always loved light in work, but I've noticed in these ones, they each have this illumination and this light, this kind of glow. And not exactly sure where that comes from. I'm sure I could come up with some really smart answer, but but I don't know, it doesn't feel appropriate to do that right now. Um, but it's a lot of discovery, and for me, maybe that's part of the light, just discovery
Yeah.
and trying to find that within my own self.
A question I wanted to ask you earlier, and it just kind of occurred to me. So, what artists or art movements have influenced you in your work? Like, if you go back to you as earlier in your career, and you're thinking about making paintings, what were you looking at? What was concerning you? Who was
Yeah.
influencing you?
I mean, Jenny Savile would definitely be one of the core early on, and it's still absolutely, she's one of my favorites. Um, how she really explored the body and paint and how those came together and beauty in a really non-traditional way. Absolutely love her. More recently with this newer work, Agnes Pelton has been a really big influence. She's a desert transcendentalist. I don't know how many people know about her. She's becoming more known. She's fantastic. Also abstract expressionism, Lee Krasner and Helen Frankenthaler, really, really loved their work. Opening up to work that isn't just realist. I really, when I was younger, just obsessed with realism. So Rembrandt, completely obsessed, still love him, but um there is work now, Lee Krasner and Helen Frankenthaler, there's no figures in there, but they still feel so kind of, they hit my body, they hit my nervous system in that way. And so those have been more current influences. Yeah, and Agnes Pelton for sure, absolutely. If you don't know
Well,
her, look her up.
thank you for sharing that. We have a couple more in this series, and I'd love you just to share a bit about this particular work, which is one of my favorites. I don't usually choose favorites, but it's certainly one of my favorites.
Thank you. Yeah, me too. So this one, it's actually my husband and I. He posed with me, and this whole series is just me and him that I'm using as reference photos for the bodies. But of course, then there's so much invention happening as well. Um, but with this, so it's called Holding, and I think it's just, I'm thinking about the spaces between us, and that is very much relationships and how we are in them and how we need them and how much we really do need each other, and we need to fall apart with each other, and we need to hold each other up at the same time quite often. And how, you kind of become a little universe into, in your own selves. And there's another painting that I think explores that as well here. But what I found interesting, I guess, in doing this painting was really allowing even more so than I had done before, allowing the areas of realism versus invention to really merge. Whereas I wasn't even sure which one is, am I going for something realist here? Am I going for something not? And just really blurring those boundaries and letting them really flow and merge and create this whole, like there is this shape that is the figures together, but then there are also, within that, there are two individual figures, and maybe more, I don't know, but I mean, for me, there's two individual figures here. And I love that kind of scale difference with how you look at it, where it's there's one, and then if you look deeper, there's multiples, and then if you look deeper, there's more and more. I just love that kind of scale difference in perception and shape and form.
Thank you for sharing that. Um, and this piece, am I correct? Was this one of the first works you've made in this new sort of chapter?
Yeah, this was the first piece. So this is called The Day Roe Fell. And I was in my studio and I heard the news that Roe fell. And of course, we all knew that it maybe was going, or it was probably going to, but it still felt like maybe it wasn't necessarily a shock, but it felt like a punch to the gut. And I was really affected by it, maybe more than I thought that I would be, living in Washington State. And um, I, it affected me in a really deep way. And so I did this really quick little pencil sketch of this sort of shape here. and with just what it felt like in that moment. And then I went to the protests and just sort of had to be among people and among other people, and that was helpful. And then I came back to my studio the next day and started this painting. And this actually really broke me into, I think, allowing my work to be less controlled and allowing it to have areas where I wasn't sure what language it was and what it was trying to portray. And it was more of a flowing of all of these languages together and a trusting that it's going to work out. And so for this painting was really just what it felt like to me that day. And then it got me really thinking about how disconnected we are as a country and how completely opposite we are, and we're just getting more and more and more so, which then made me think about the spaces between us and how we connect. And that led to these paintings that are often about relationships and relationships between us. And so it's interesting that this, this division just led me to try to find connection again, which I think is just how, maybe part of who I am, is just needing to find that whenever possible. This was a intense, powerful painting for me to do. And then this one, Collapsing Out, it's very, very much about, I mean, again, I don't go into paintings knowing what they're about at the beginning at all. This is more just what I've seen after, this feeling of kind of collapsing into my own self while also holding my own self. You kind of have to do that, I think, is you have to just completely fall apart sometimes in order to expand outward again. And so that's sort of where this one came from. But this also came from that row painting. Again, these aren't political. They're not about reproductive rights. The rest of these paintings aren't, but they're about that how we are with each other, how we are with ourselves, and how just that space between us.
I understand. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know this is that was deeply personal and certainly illuminating for people who are interested in sort of understanding more about what you're thinking as you're making these works. I know that our let's say audience here today, or participants, probably come from a variety of different backgrounds. Certainly, many of them are students of the Academy as well. And I know that you teach. What are some of the things what are some of the challenges you hear from young, emerging sort of like painters today? And what are some of the roadblocks that you're hearing that they're facing in their journey being artists?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I think we all face them no matter what stage in our career we're in. I think a big one is really finding your own unique voice, because there's so much incredible art out there happening right now, and it's so easily accessible. Just Instagram, it's out there so much that I think it can be a bit overwhelming, because we might, a student might see something and be like, oh, that painting is that's what I just did in the studio. So just feeling like it's all been done before, I think, is a big challenge that I see a lot in trying to find your own voice. And I've definitely struggled with that and continue to go through waves of what is my voice now. And I think what I try to say is that it hasn't been done by you. I mean, everything, like, kind of get that out of your head, that you need to come up with, you need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. It has been invented. That is not your job. The most important thing is to make the most honest work you can make. And so it's really just about getting to know yourself more. And part of that is looking at a lot of art and seeing what it is that you like and what it is that you don't like, and trying to see what those threads are. And then just making work, just going and trying things and trying something again and taking the risks and failing and failing and failing. And not putting the pressure on yourself to come up with the most unique something, because then I feel like it might feel too contrived, and it's just really challenging to do as well. And then another thing I think is making work that has some message. And this is something I really, really struggled with, was feeling like I had to make work that had a really important message, a very clear message. And whenever I did that, it felt like a very contrived painting. It didn't actually make a meaningful painting. And so getting rid of that and really making work from my gut and not my mind, getting out of my head, where I think we're all very much in our heads, and especially in the contemporary art world, we need to do these talks and sound smart. And that's just not where I'm at in the studio. And I think a lot of artists, that's not where the work comes from. Absolutely. Many artists do come from the head. And I think that's, if it works for them, absolutely. But for me and maybe other artists like me, it needs to come from some other place that's pre-verbal. And if I try to get into the verbal place, it stops the work. So I think, knowing what the message is before you paint the painting, and thinking that you need to come up with a soundbite and a message and a great little Instagram meme, like immediately, that's just doesn't need to happen. Most important thing is your studio. That's it. You in the painting.
Thank you for sharing that. And so we'll quickly go through what I believe is the last image of your paintings in this presentation. And then I have a few more questions I'd like to ask you about some other projects that you're working on as well.
Cool. Yeah, so this one's called The Space Between Our Separateness, and it was the painting I did actually just after the row painting. And it was my attempt, however futile, to try to find some connection with this incredibly dividing world. And of course, this one is not about the political thing that happened. It was really just about this just knowing that there is, and trusting that there is some space between that turning away that we have so much in our country and in our lives and in our relationships, and even with our own selves, that just trusting that actually there is a space where there's way more that we have in common than we have different, and just trusting that. And that's what I had to do with this painting. When I was painting it, there was a lot of just trusting that I'm gonna figure this out as it comes along. And it changed and a few times, and yeah, it's cool to look at it again. But yeah, that's a little bit about this painting.
So thank you. Thank you. So that was the last in the series of your paintings that we'll look at. We're not going to show a film for people who are looking at the word film thinking that a film is about to start. But we're going to actually talk about a film that you created. So you mentioned other media earlier, thinking about sculpture, thinking about other ways of expressing yourself. So what led you to making a documentary or film?
Yeah, so this film is only 4 minutes long. And I made it, well, first of all, the image, you could, just to tell you all what it is, if you don't know, those are all the paintings that I did at the very, very, very beginning, before I knew they were going to turn into anything, before I thought anyone would see them. These are those left-handed paintings that I did. And then they turned into the more involved paintings that you've seen some of those. So I made this body of work and exhibited it at Flowers Gallery in Hong Kong. And that was, I think, in 2021. And I couldn't go because the pandemic, and it was a 3-week quarantine. And I felt like I needed to be there in some way, and I needed to talk about and share and just have my voice out there a little bit about what this shift was, because I knew that it was a really big shift in my work that I had just done, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit. And so my husband is a filmmaker, and so I asked if he would help, and we created this little 4-minute film together on the shift in my work and on this new body of work. And it was so much fun to do, and I remembered that I love editing video. I at Cornish College I did painting and also video and sculpture, and I hadn't done that in like a decade. And so it was really, really, really fun to go back into this essentially moving paintings. I mean, it's you're dealing with color, you're dealing with rhythm and time, but in a very different way. And also telling a story. And it was so much fun to do that.
And I believe you can actually watch this documentary on your website. That's
Yes.
correct.
Yep. Yep. You just go into the film section, and again, it's only 4 minutes, so you don't need much time.
So so that concludes our slide presentation. I have a few more questions before we conclude today. So the first question is, how's your new environment? How do you think that's going to impact your work? You've recently relocated. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that. I mean, you can share as little as much as you want. I'm just it's kind of interesting. I know, like yesterday or the day before, you were traveling, and so thank you for even finding the time to still do this interview.
Of course. Thank you so much for doing this. I thought I was, so I'm in LA now, but last week I was in Seattle, and um I was in LA in the fall as well. So I kind of had already moved here, but we actually moved our stuff and animals and everything through the rainstorm, which is why we arrived last night in the rain. Um Interestingly, in California. So yeah, I don't know exactly how it's going to influence my work, but I know whenever I go somewhere, when I've been in New Mexico, it's influenced my work. Moving back to Seattle from New York, brought in a lot more nature in my work. I felt like already my colors are going warmer, so that I think that is happening. And we'll see what else. I mean, I just moved here, but well, I guess I was here in the fall as well. But oh, something I noticed was happening in the fall is I was getting even more interested in shapes and looking at the plants here. I love plants, and they're so different here than in Washington State or in New York. And seeing the shapes of the plants and their kind of roundness and their just really interesting kind of full shapes. And I feel like that's coming into my work more, and we'll see where. I don't exactly know, but I probably more warmth um and shapes. I don't know. We'll see though.
So, a few final questions. So, obviously, you've just shifted from one city to another, and there's going to be a period of time where you sort of have to get yourself settled and get set up. But when you were, you know, uh, back in Seattle, like, what was your typical day? What's an ideal day for you as an artist, from morning to evening? Like, what's the structure? You don't have to tell me exactly what you're doing, but what's the structure of an ideal day for you?
Yeah, so I like to keep pretty kind of standard working hours. I found that helps me stay balanced. So I generally work Monday through Friday during the day. So coffee for sure, and meditation, and kind of just getting grounded and centered. And then I'll go into the studio and just dive into whatever it is that I'm working on. Um, it's generally going to be some big painting that I'm doing, and I will have an audiobook or music or podcast depending on kind of what I'm working on. There's times like in a really detailed area where I need to kind of occupy part of my brain with a story or a kind of language. And then there's other times when I can't have language and I need to have music because I need to have that part of my brain available to make decisions. So um, I will kind of choose what I need to do there, and I'll basically paint all day. I'll take some breaks, take the dog for a walk, or just go outside, put my bare feet on the ground to get grounded. Love that. Um, and then in the evening, sometimes I will do kind of some meditative sketching, and if I'm feeling like that might be kind of coming out in me, and that will often happen actually kind of late at night, which is yeah, it's just kind of an interesting time for that to happen. I think it's probably because part of my brain is sort of shut down, so it allows access to more of the ideas for where the paintings are, for what the paintings are going to be. Like that is often happening late at night, just kind of in a sketchbook, or really just sitting and closing my eyes and seeing what's happening and trying different things in my imagination, and then I might jot those down in a sketchbook so that next day in the studio I can kind of flesh them out a little bit more. So that's essentially my ideal day, painting all day.
I'm sure this has happened before, but I'm curious. So you run into someone who knows nothing about your artwork. You don't have a phone, you don't have a book or anything to show them about your work. How do you describe the kind of work that you make?
Oh, I feel like I'm really terrible at this elevator speech. So students who are watching this, please be better than me. What do I say? I mean, I generally say that I do I mean, in the past it was figurative realism, and now it's um realism with kind of an abstracted language. To be honest, I'm still trying to figure this one out. yeah, gonna be totally honest here. I can't fully describe it at the moment. And part of that is just because I haven't really tried to very much. I focus way more in on what's happening in the studio and less being able to talk to someone about it, which I know I need to do.
Well, even if you described it to your best ability, it still requires the other person to have the intellectual imagination and scope to envision what you're saying. So,
Yeah.
um,
I find it can it just I feel kind of silly trying to describe it. Um, I don't know. It feels kind of awkward trying to describe it. Yeah.
we're down to the final couple of minutes or so. So, what are you looking forward to? What are the new projects you're working on that you're excited about? And hopefully there are some.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm working on well, just beginning to work on a show that well, I can't say anything else about that, but it's gonna happen out here in LA. And so I'm very excited to dive into that. I've because I've been in the transition in in my moving and everything, I um a lot of that work is it's not physical yet. It's not made yet, but I've just been like soaking things in and just and I really love this part of it where I'm just I can feel the paintings. They're there and they're coming closer and I'm kind of having conversations with them. And so I'm pulling them in right now. So that's what I'm really excited about. One of the things I'm excited about. My mom, Deborah Chapin, is also an artist, and my husband and I are making a short documentary for her. She's been working for over 50 years, and what's it, kind of this year is her 50th anniversary of the kind of work she does. And so I'm working on a documentary, so doing some more video, which I love, to be doing some more kind of editing and film work. Um, got some ideas for some sculptures. We'll see if that happens or not, when that happens. But yeah, I'm just really excited to get back into the studio and to see what happens. Yeah, I'm just really excited about it.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I just want to sort of like end on one question again. You kind of touched on it earlier, but I think for an artist who's at such a wonderful stage in their career as you, there's certainly other artists that are looking at you and your career and just wondering like, how do you get there, right? Like and of course you can't answer that in one single question because everyone's journey is different. But um as someone who's been painting for years and has worked with galleries and has shown at museums and won awards, like how do you deal with doubt?
Hmm. Um, try to make friends with it, I think. Um, meaning don't try to push it away because it's going to totally exist. It's gonna be there. Um, also bringing it into the work. I actually find that any difficult emotion that I'm having, which is often gonna be, work related, career related, trying to just allow it to be there and allow it to come into my work in the way that it needs to, and again, just trusting. So it's allowing that doubt to be there and then trusting and also using it as fuel, like using any difficult kind of negative emotion or fear, or bad feedback or whatever, as fuel, or rejection, as fuel for like, okay, I'm gonna I can do better, I can push more, I can push more. And so I think it's really using those difficult emotions and having them work for you instead of against you. I think that really has helped me. Doesn't make it easy, but gets me through it.
Well, Aleah, I really want to thank you for your time today. This has been a fantastic, eye-opening conversation for me. I hope it's been pleasant for you. I know you were on the hot seat. You've answered a lot of questions. I had like 20 more, but in respect of the time frame that we have here, we're going to bring it to a conclusion. I want to thank you again for your generosity. Be kind to yourself. I know you've made a big shift to another city, may or may not be easy, but certainly I'm sure it's going to be a great adventure. I want to thank New York Academy of Art for creating a platform for these kinds of conversations. They really are important. It's great to hear directly from artists, regardless of what stage in their career. I think it's just great for people to share ideas and their own experiences. So With that said, I'm going to wish you a great day, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dexter. Thank you for doing this. And thank you to the New York Academy of Art and everyone who has shown up. Really appreciate it. Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Well, the recording will be available, and we will spread the word. Have a great day.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.